good evening, and welcome to Scarecrow Labs. It's Thursday, August already, August 1st, 2013. I tell you, where did this year go? I've heard a couple people say there's a distortion in the space-time continuum or whatever, and that's why it seems like time's going even faster than it ever was. Just don't know, but boy, it does seem like this year has gone by in a wicked pace. Well, do have a very special feature presenter tonight. We have managed to arrange a presentation by Eric Dollard. I think many in the audience are familiar with some of his work, and he'll be coming along tonight right after our first presentation for the evening, which, as usual, is Mr. Sterling Allen with This Week in Free Energy. Please do stand by. Well, Sterling Allen, how are you doing tonight, man?
Doing good, Gary. How you doing?
Real good. It looks like you're back home. You're not doing this one from a motel room somewhere out on the road. You're actually settled in, sleeping in your own bed, breathing your own air, living like a normal human being, eh?
Yep.
Well, I tell you, you've been traveling Uncle Sterling of late. It seems like every time we talk, you're someplace else. So I'm looking forward to a really powerful presentation tonight. Let me go ahead and give you full screen. Let you take it away.
It's funner from the road. Anyway, this week in free energy highlight, of course, is the LENR Weekly. Just got that up about an hour ago, and highlights this week from the colloquially called cold fusion sector. Most likely not fusion, probably transmutation. There were many follow-up reports on Def Callian's demo of about a week, 2 days ago. And I would guess in the ballpark of 15 nominally mainstream sources around the planet, largely in Italy. And then, of course, regular coverage from those who track the LENR sector, and we've got those over at the Def Callian demo blog that's linked up on our site. And then also some highlights from this week. Ruby Carrot of Cold Fusion Now has done a phenomenal job on the ground at ICCF 18. She's a reporter at Cold Fusion Now, the primary reporter over there, and she is doing just a first-rate job, in my opinion, of trying to get out there and getting a microphone in front of people and reporting on what she's finding. It's a difficult sector to be in, and it would be nice if they could get a few more donations so that she doesn't feel like by the end of the year she needs to look for other employment because this is just not panning out. It'd be nice if we could show her some love on the donation button and keep her doing her great work. She was at the conference. I think it was like a 5-day conference, and could have been more. And she was putting something up almost every day, a synopsis of what she experienced and what went on that day, posting photos and whatnot, kind of giving you just a taste of what it would be like to be there. And so all her stories, of course, are linked up. At that presentation at the International Conference on Cold Fusion, ICCF 18, at the University of Missouri, the Show Me State, included 85 oral presentations, 40 posters, 5 laboratory tours, 5 technical panels, and more. Of course, they also had a session featuring the Def Callian demo and a question and answer session with them. And then also in this section of LENR, there was a 12-part series reported on by Stephen Krivet over at New Energy Times on ORNL, nuclear cavitation. You want to take a look at those if that's of interest to you. Of course, if that's of interest to you, you're probably subscribed to his newsletter and you already read those. But for those of you who have not, say again.
But of course.
And then talking about conferences, as you mentioned, I was at the Tesla Tech conference this last week, got back Sunday night late. And I did post a video. I mentioned last week that I was going to be posting a video, and I got it up. I Wish You Were Here video that kind of gives you a rundown of what the booths looked like and the venue and just kind of an on-the-ground flavor of what it would be like to be there. And also did a couple of interviews, which ended up being enlarged in your show. I had a brief demonstration from Olin Gregg with his unification coil that was replicated work of Daniel Nunez.
Nunez, yeah.
Yeah. And then you did a phenomenal, I thought he really did a great presentation on your show right after that. That was a treat. And then I did an interview with him a day or two after that.
To be honest with you, I should take a moment here and thank you for, because that night started out looking like it was going to be a real stinker. The fellow that I thought I had lined up to be a presenter bailed on me, and the fellows in the audience who would normally have put their hands up and say, yeah, I'm working on something, I'll come in and do some bragging for a minute or two, they all let me down. I have to, sincerely thank Sterling for coming up with a couple of interesting fellows to fill in last week, because, without his help, last week's show would have been a real stinker. So thank you, Sterling. I really appreciate your help last week.
Yeah, I thought that turned out really well. It was, I look at that as the universe at work, almost like it was meant to be, and with emphasis on almost like, with probably predestined. It was in the stars. Anyway, I had an interview with that radio talk show host that you did at the second half of last week's show the next morning. That was a lot of fun. He's a character. I really enjoy his style and whatnot. He has kind of a unique style similar to yourself. Yours is kind of dry and his is really hot. I love, they're both really interesting to listen to. And I would encourage the audience to listen to your weekly wrap up of the news and news rant. You do that now on Monday nights. Subscribe to Gary's channel and make sure you listen to those. It's just a hoot to listen to how he describes these crazy things that are going on the planet. So moving on to Roland Gregg and that interview that I did with him, they are going to be having kits available for sale. Already you can purchase the coils. And he also talked about some tests that they ran where they did, for example, they with the battery, they ran some lights and saw how fast the voltage went down, running the lights for X period of time. And then they put the coil in the circuit, and the duration was like 10 times longer. I can't remember the exact number, but it was crazy. A lot more energy out from that same battery at the same starting point. I can't remember the details of it, but it was pretty impressive, showing that this thing really is pulling energy from somewhere to give that assist on the output side. Another highlight of the show was Bob Roner was there with Danielle Roberts. They had what they called a plasma booster, and also they had this bright flashing light plasma thing that they demonstrated, both using air as a medium as well as noble gas. This was demonstrated also at Danielle Roberts' lecture on Sunday morning. I was shot a video of that, put it up on our channel. So there's about 4 videos there actually that we shot. One was an interview with Danielle. One was Bob giving kind of a presentation out in the booth area. One was Bob giving his demonstration during Daniel's lecture. And then one was Bob Rotor talking about his days when Joseph Papp was still alive, and the work that he did with him, kind of strolling down memory lane. And then moving on to, you're going to have Eric Dollard on. That's great. There's 2 or 3 stories in this week's lineup. The most recent of which I don't yet have linked up on my news. I'm just minutes away from finishing that one. It's linked to a video by Tech Z called Shredded Messiah to Save the Work of Eric Dollard. It's a 1-hour kind of rebuttal to something that Aaron Murakami put up, kind of, clearing his name and the work of all the people over at EPD Labs, all the people that were helping Eric Dollard, and kind of, I thought it was very well done. It was much more tactful than the first one that he put up. And then also part 5, a report on Eric Dollard's first webcast. On Tuesday, he did an hour-and-a-half show with Peter Lindemann and Aaron Murakami up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And that was fascinating to hear him do the question and answer with the people in the audience. And I encouraged him to do at least a monthly question and answer session like that. And he thought he could pull that off, and so we're looking forward to that. And then part 4 was kind of a follow-up from the previous controversy. Some associates of Eric Dollard's basically defend him against a meth head portrayal that was put in an earlier video, saying basically, as far as they could tell, Eric shows no signs of being a meth addict. So kind of clearing Eric's name in that regard. And then finally, in this week's wrap-up, I'm going to end early so you can have more time with Eric. Rosemary Ainsley, who
you're going to screw up my schedule.
Well, we can chew the. Maybe I can tell you about. I don't yet have full permission to announce this one. First of all, let me finish the Rosemary Ainsley one, and then we'll go off on another tangent here. I'll give you before I have permission to post the story, snippet of something that I've just come across. Anyway, Rosemary Ainsley is planning a final demo that she says is definitely my last demo for August 4th. The time is questioned as to when that's going to be. Anyway, I've got that linked up, and links to where you can get the definitive word, hopefully, on when that's going to be. And then, when were you planning on wrapping up this portion so you could get Eric on?
Sorry, I was typing in the chat room, Sterling, and how it is. I try and do 6 things at once here. Well, this segment of the show usually goes till about 20 minutes or 25 minutes after the hour. But if that's all the material you got, I figured you'd have more material than that. You're leaving me a little short here tonight. Well,
I can. I want to tell you about something that's really cool. I won't be able to give the name of the inventor yet and the name of the technology, but I can give you the ballpark. In our number 1 position in the top 5 exotic free energy technologies listing on the homepage of PezWiki, and also you can find that listing and runners-up at top5energy.com. These are technologies I've been tracking for the last 3-4 years. Is this self-loop motor generator system. It's the genre that presently has around 25 different independent groups that have come up with the same thing on their own. They haven't compared to somebody else and replicated something. They have come up with it through independent means. And this is another technology of that ilk. And they have a 16 kilowatt system that they want to put on my home. And
Now wait a minute, Sterling. Where have we heard that before?
Yeah, I've heard that many times in the past. And so I'm hoping to go fly out, see it, and get some coverage on it in our news. And also, they actually have filed a patent on it, and they said that they had one awarded. Sometimes inventors don't know the difference between having it published and having it awarded. When you file a patent, after 1 year, if it's doesn't look like it's going to be making the cut for the stamp of the patent office saying this is an awarded patent and it passes our criteria, then they just publish it, so it becomes public domain. And this patent was published, I think, in 2008. So it's been around for a while. Back in 2003, when they had that Northeast power outage, the famous one, you probably were in on that one too. Meaning that you were affected by it, not that you caused it.
Yeah, I remember pedaling the, pedal power generator so my wife could dry her hair. Yeah.
Well, this guy's house was lit up like his house was lit up like a Christmas tree, and the cops came by as a police and said, "Where are you getting your electricity?" He said, "Ever heard of a generator?" And they said, "Well, that's awfully quiet." I said, "Yeah, well, we got some muffler stuff or whatever," and the police went on their way. But yeah, he had power for 5 days from this generator system, running his fridge, his DVDs, VCR. He was just camper while everyone else was, struggling to keep the refrigerator cooled down, wondering what to do with all that thawed out food, etc. He was a happy camper. And that was in 2003. He says he's had a running version for 15 years. It's been third-party tested by a group that also does testing for NASA, looking to get documentation on that we can publish with our story. Has also been reviewed by some nuclear scientists who just scratched their head and said, this isn't supposed to work, but it's working. And he's had about 50 to witnesses. I'm hoping to be able to talk one or two of those or more. That more would be great. And I hope for myself, but they said that they would like to put on my house. I asked them, well, how much is that going to cost? They're going to go through the spreadsheet. They've made 17 so far, all of which supposedly have worked, of different sizes and shapes. They've been various iterations, not the same. No, two of them have been the same. And so they've, different iterations and shapes. And
stand by for a second, Sterling. The audio has gone caca on us. I killed my return video feed to you, hoping to clean it up a little bit. Okay. Alrighty, I think it's settled down. We can continue now. Let's go ahead and finish up.
Yeah, I actually found out about these guys a year and a half, maybe 2.5 years ago. They called me, and I put them in touch with an incubator group that this week supposedly may be signing a contract with them to give them some funding or whatnot, get them moving to the next step. They want to go into production, and that takes a lot of money. And but they are also interested in maybe starting to get some coverage. Up until now, they have been under the radar, haven't wanted any coverage, and they may be changing their tune. So I've got a story written, had it finished, sent it to them, waiting for a response. So what I've told you so far doesn't give you names of the inventors or locations, the name of the technology, but it tells you what they've got. And I think I'm in the range of what I'm able to talk about there. So exciting stuff. I'm stoked about that one. And if they are for real, they're probably going to be popping into number one position.
Well, now, in our top. A couple obvious questions. When is the installation at your place scheduled?
I don't know how long it will take them. These are off-the-shelf components, motors, generators, belts, starter motors, batteries. The batteries to run the starter motor, and then they disconnect the starter motor after it comes up to speed.
So if we don't really have any idea when one might be installed at Sterling's house, we certainly don't have any idea when I might be able to run down to Walmart and put my credit card on the counter and walk out with one for me.
That process usually takes 18 months in the best case scenario when you don't have obstacles, in your way. And so the difference between early adopters and beta testing and alpha testing versus being able to get one from the end cap in Walmart, you're talking about many, many, many months between those two events. And so some of you may want to raise your hand and say, hey, I'll be a beta tester. In fact, I bet pretty much everyone in your audience would want to be a beta tester on something like this, depending, of course, on the price.
Having been an alpha and beta tester for Microsoft for some years, I can tell you that, quite often it's it's kind of a rocky road. But yeah, I for something like that, if the damn thing actually works, I might even pay to be a beta tester. I don't know. I just is there? Do we have any idea what something like this might cost to manufacture? Because you can figure if it's going to cost them $1 to manufacture it, by the time it gets on that end cap at Walmart, it's going to be $2. So I mean, do we have any initial projections on what it might cost to actually make one of these things ready to deliver?
Right. Remember, they're using off-the-shelf components, so it's a matter of purchasing and assembling, basically.
Yeah.
There is some, you've got to build your framework, you've got to do your mounting. And so I would guess that if they didn't have other distractions in their way, they could build one in a week or a month. I don't know.
For how much dough? I mean, you're looking at the various components that might be involved in this thing. I mean, are we talking a $1,000 widget? Or are we talking a $5,000 widget?
I'm guessing 5,000 in that ballpark. Yeah.
Okay, so by the time it actually made it to the end cap at Walmart, where I would buy one, it might be as much as 10 Gs.
But this is a 16, 17 kilowatt unit. You're not going to have to get 2 or 3 of them. It's going to handle your peak load. You're not going to have to worry about battery backup. And again, I don't know the price, and so I'm just totally winging a guess on that one. So don't quote me on that, okay?
Yeah. No, I understand. Yeah, and that's all I was really looking for was kind of an educated guess. I mean, before I clear everything off the credit card so I can afford that bad boy, I kind of wanted to have an idea how much I had to clear off.
Well, I've been doing this news reporting for 11 years, and I have yet to have one of these gizmos running my house. I've had quite a few people on the order of 8 to 10 who have offered to do it, and none of them have materialized yet. So having that finally happen would be really nice.
And I can tell you that I have priced 10 kilowatt solar for my own requirement here at home. I figure if I had 10 kilowatt solar here, I could, I keep in mind I'm a greedy SOB and I use, more than the average amount of electricity. I would need 10 kilowatts during daylight hours to be able to comfortably run everything that I run here on a 24-hour day basis, day and night. So, even though it's very rare that I use that much all at the same time. If you've got to store it during the day so you can use some during the night, that's the kind of capacity that I would need. And a setup like that is quite expensive. We're talking a good bit more than $10,000.
Yeah. One other quick teaser: the TMR effect, tunneling magnetoresistance, is a story that is in our hopper. And this is using quantum effects, and they have developed 3 different sizes available for market: 5 kilowatt, 10 kilowatt, 15 kilowatt. These would be affordable, they would be reliable, and they would work day and night. So be looking for that story maybe tomorrow, maybe next day.
Why am I surprised you didn't say anything about Rossi being out there on the quest for a Stirling motor that he could hook up to an ECAT? I mean, that has been kind of bouncing around news space for a while. That one just didn't intrigue you?
It is in our LENR Weekly. Okay. I should add that to our description for the week. I can fit it in there. That's a little bit skinny this week, so I can add a phrase to that effect.
He's having a hell of a time finding a thermal to a rotational
electric
conversion. He's looking for some way to convert the heat that he's creating with his gizmo into mechanical energy to spin an alternator, and apparently that's become something of an issue for them. Anyway, that's all the buzz over at the ECAT news arena. That it's like it's going to slow down Rossi's progress if he doesn't come up with one of these things. And I said, what? Okay. I mean, all right.
Well, this is a pretty good audience to throw something like that out there. I would hope that he's going to get some solutions that are worthwhile coming from the crowd.
Well, yeah, and if the thing is generating steam, there are a couple of steam turbine solutions that I would think would fit right in with what he's doing. But I'm just an old country boy with straw for brains. What do I know? In any case, Sterling, is that about all you got for us tonight?
Well, that'll be it. I look forward to listening to Eric's interview with you.
All righty, and we managed to bring it in right on time. Here I was afraid you were gonna make me put on my dancing shoes for 10 minutes.
All right, I spared you the dancing shoes. Spared you again this week.
Yeah, you saved my butt again. All right, thank you very much, Sterling. You have a good evening, sir.
All right, you too. Take care.
Okay, and that was Sterling Allen's presentation for the evening. If any of you out there happen to know of a widget that Rossi might be able to use for his ECAT gadget that will take the energy created off the ECAT, which of course is heat. That's what this thing is doing. It's creating heat, and assume it can create steam. If any of you happen to know of a good, reliable, off-the-shelf widget that he could use in combination with his ECAT to, spin a shaft and hopefully spin a turbine, you might want to make a mention, maybe provide a link over at the ECAT forum, because apparently this is causing something of a disruption in their timetable over there. But in any case, it's time to start our feature presentation for the evening. So if you folks will please stand by for just a moment while I do all the Skyping in the background here. I'm going to put up my little please stand by gizmo so I can work my electronic magic in the background. Take care. We'll be back in just a moment. To the audience, we've finished Sterling Allen's presentation. I want to thank Sterling for his coverage of the interesting exotic alternative energy news for the week. But now it's time to move into our feature presentation, so please do stand by. And tonight, as our feature presenter, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we have Mr. Eric Dollard with us for the evening. Eric Dollard, how are you tonight, sir?
Oh, pretty good.
Well, let's see. I think I had to tweak the volume down a little bit for Sterling, so I just boosted it up a little bit for you. You're just a little bit quiet on me. So we're broadcasting from some secret, undisclosed underground bunker in Washington State. Is that where you're coming to us from?
Yeah, that's pretty close.
All righty.
Description.
Well, I've got a secret underground bunker in the other Washington. The one where if the wind's blowing to the south, you can smell it. So it's we have to kind of keep our heads down around here because we live mighty close to where all the action is.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah,
Effluence.
Well, yeah, the effluence, not affluence. Some people say this is an affluent area, but yes, we refer to it as effluence.
Effluent, yeah.
Yes. In any case, you did a pretty darn nice presentation a couple days ago, where I think for the first time since the late 1980s or early 1990s, I can't even remember. I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, so it's one of those. But saw you sit next to Peter Lindemann. Haven't seen that in ages. That was good to see. It was a nice presentation. You covered some interesting material, and I understand that the presentation you're going to do for us tonight kind of follows along in that vein. I've got right now checking. We have 80 participants that are active in our live chat room at this time. Looking at the pull on the router, it looks like we've got about 700 anonymous cowards who choose to watch tonight's presentation, but choose.
Like I call them the silent majority.
They are indeed the silent majority, and I've got to tell you that apparently you are something of a draw, because the numbers that I'm seeing are about twice what my normal broadcast receives. So I would have to say thank you very much for dragging in, kicking and screaming a few more viewers than we would normally get. But in any case, I should back off, shut up, let you get into your presentation, because I know you've got a good bit of material you want to cover. First and foremost, I think you want to give us a little bit of a recap on the conference that you just did. You did a pretty nice conference, the Bedini-Lindemann conference. Probably only a handful in my audience were able to attend that conference, and any bits of wisdom you can provide from that would probably be very much appreciated by the fellows in the audience.
Well, the conference was an attempt to present a very mathematical and theoretical subject to an audience that has no comprehension of those things, so that made it a bit difficult. What happened is in order to present a rational and coherent lecture, I had to write a whole book beforehand. It's probably a couple thousand pages of notes. I just finished it up actually not too long ago. So the lecture at the conference is kind of a simplified outline of a book that I'm basically wrapping up now that covers a lot of the mathematical theories that I've been presenting in the public in the past, actually a long time ago. It will help explain a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about. It is a highly theoretical subject, but I presented it in such a way that things that are already understood, like phases of the moon and sunrise and sunset, and use those instead of electrical terms. And actually, I think this might be one of the biggest things that I've ever put together.
Don't leave us hanging now, give us a little taste,
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly how to describe it. I mean, it's, I'm kind of worn out on it, to be frank with you. Whatever questions people might have, that would help enliven me in the situation. But basically, what it does is it leads to a thorough understanding of the Tesla rotating magnetic field. That's what I was primarily after.
Well, what is different between Tesla's theory of the rotating magnetic field and what would be considered classical physics description?
Well, physics doesn't describe those things. They just describe projections or shadows or come up with their own idea. The theory of the rotating electrical field was never really presented in a theoretical form by Tesla. It took Carl Steinmetz and a few others to put that together, because Tesla mainly worked in visions and discoveries, but when it came to engineering equations and what have you, other people really had to do that kind of work. But it really revolutionized the design of motors and generators, because then the innate rotating property of alternating current became part of the operation of the system, where with the direct current you had to use these devices called commutators that put a carrot in front of the horse and then keep the armature running after the field magnets. And the speed is not accurate and the efficiencies are less and all the sparking. So Tesla figured out a way to tap the rotational property of electricity itself and produce motors and generators that operated on that principle. And of course, today they're the basic foundation of almost every rotating electrical device, DC and AC.
Well, let me run something by you and see how you react. And a lot of people, a few hundred years ago, had this picture in their mind that the Earth was this stationary object and the sun rotated around the Earth. Okay, then a couple boys got a little smarter and they started figuring things out, and they came up with the idea, no. The sun is the center of the universe, and the Earth rotates around the sun. And of course, that was considered heresy for a long time until a lot of people, couldn't ignore it anymore, and they finally accepted that. Now, of course, today we're a little bit more sophisticated than that, and we realize that the Earth in its orbit around the sun is actually being dragged by the sun's energy well at very high velocity. around the center of the galaxy. And that even our local galaxy is just one of billions of galaxies that are being dragged around the central core of some other monstrous thing that nobody even really knows about. Is electricity a correlation for that? Can we correlate our understanding of electricity kind of with our understanding of the action of planetary bodies, going from the micro to the macro? Is there a correlation?
Well, when you're dealing with planets and the sun, you're dealing with cycles and rotations, and those are symbolic of electricity, and they do produce electrical forms. But when you're dealing with the gravitational forces and electrostatic stresses and magnetic fields, what appears to be dead objects in cold, vacuous space is not really the fact. You have an incredible complex of forces and fields that nobody even has an understanding of. Now, it's interesting that you pointed out the situation where it was considered the Earth was the center of the universe. It actually was not the original concept. There was a guy, I forget exactly the years, he has a hard-to-pronounce name, it's Ptolemy, I believe, came up with the first theory of relativity, which was the Earth is the center of the universe and everything revolved around it, and literally led to a conceptual and theoretical dark ages for 1,000 years. This has happened again with Einstein, relativity, and all that has thrown us back into this dark ages of thought, and basically that's one of the things that's making electricity understandable. The frightening situation is the people that are supposedly the engineers and what have you in the utility companies no longer have any concept of electricity, and they're hooking up everything wrong, and it's dangerous. And so from the practical standpoint, this new dark ages is impacting our electrical technology in such a way that it could lead to a massive shutdown.
Well, now, in defense of Einstein, even though there's much of Einstein that I disagree with, a lot of his stuff works. And, it may not be the whole story, but apparently it's enough of the story that, you can kind of make his stuff work. But, I do agree with you that, it's kind of locked people in, a lockstep where they can't consider other alternatives because, Einstein is supposed to be the end-all, be-all. And it's only recently with some of the theories being put forward by some of the quantum physicists, the string theory and brains and all that nonsense, that, people are starting to get outside of the Einstein box. But, for a long time, Einstein's stuff worked. But what about you said something that's critical, and that is that the way we're hooking up our electric grid these days is being done wrong in your judgment, perhaps dangerous in your judgment. Could you flesh that out a little bit? What are they do? I mean, it works. So how is it's wrong?
Well, it works, but the stresses, electrical stresses and harmonics are becoming more intense. The protecting the customer against transients and waves and other things that don't belong in the household is being bypassed. For example, I kind of loosely associate with probably one of the premier utility companies in the western United States in California, and being they are the best, and I can't really say anything bad about anybody on the air, they installed a capacitor bank in a substation at one point in time that was basically too large, made it very difficult to turn the thing on and off without giant Jacob ladder effects occurring that would scare people out of the campground next to the substation. But it did basically energize the area appropriately, and then somebody got a bright idea to double its capacity. Well, its capacity was already about twice too big. The technicians and linemen did a beautiful job of installing it, which is a characteristic of this particular utility company. Their work is impeccable. They still remain with the three-phase, three-wire system, which is stable and safe and non-interference generating. But now the capacitor bank was 4 times too big. And when they closed the switch, The stresses on the power system just caused the voltage to rise far beyond what was acceptable, so it tripped out, and they left it at that. So now there's no capacitor bank. The voltage level is running 8% low, so the regulators are always having to compensate for that 8%. So you have that offset. Now, not only was it a ridiculous mistake, but nobody was smart enough to correct the mistake by going to the capacitor bank and pulling the fuses out of a certain percentage of capacitors and reducing the kilovar capacity back to a rational level. Instead, the whole thing's just turned off and left there.
And any chance we can glom those capacitors?
Yeah.
Wouldn't want to get involved in midnight capacitor grabbing. But one of the things you mentioned there, now we've all seen the late night black and white movie where Frankenstein is being created and we got these huge arcs flying across. Okay, now I can just imagine going up to a power station, grabbing hold of one of those big switch gates and yanking it down and have an arc fly out of there that knock me into next Tuesday. But that is a nice segue into one of the questions that's come through from the audience. Now, back in the early days, I don't know if they're referring to Borderland days or whatever. Back in the early days, there was some recording of Peter Linderman mentioning that there was something about the spark gap that invited radiant energy in. Now, is it possible that during that time when they're opening this gate on those capacitors, there is an excess of energy flowing in from some mysterious source that nobody can account for? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, that actually is a very serious problem, opening large air switches and configurations like that where you get a plasma and an arc that's not really stable. It's not Peter Lindeman's interpretation is kind of not really correct on that. What happens is the arc is constantly changing its electrical characteristics with the cycle of the alternating current, and what it does is it aggravates the cycle. You might loosely make it analogous to having a wheel out of balance on your car or something, where the cycle's no longer symmetrical and it produces these severe vibrations. When you're trying to disconnect something like a capacitor bank, which has those innate properties in the way that it reacts with alternating current already, produces some very mysterious electrical transients that would give you the indication that the discharges are synthesizing energy, or you could say taking energy from another dimension, to use the words of physics or whatever. Steinmetz wrote quite a bit on this, but the modern theorists have basically just abandoned all that.
That's interesting. So it may just be a matter of interpretation, and the poor guy, the basement experimenter who's experimenting with these spark gaps, is doing his honest best with the measuring equipment he has available to him, and he's seeing stuff that to him just looks, this is from outer space. This is a wild and crazy form of energy that I cannot account for. And of course thinks that some higher dimensions being tapped into, and this is energy from nothing. Would that be a reasonable summation?
Yeah, I mean you can express it that way. The disruptive discharge is one spark phenomena. The plasma discharge is another. It's an extremely complicated subject that no solid analysis exists for. If you want to get into a completely abstract level of mathematics or theoretical electrical engineering, that's the place to start. The problem is that most of these people that experiment are really in a stimulation gratification loop where they don't want to spend the 12 years necessary to understand electricity before you start getting involved in fooling around with its deeper concepts. So they run themselves around in loops with misconceptions and then form, little societies around false ideas, and then the whole thing just basically becomes like another religion.
All right. Now I've got, obviously, I want to try and keep us as much on track as possible. We have digressed off on a couple of topics that weren't on the punch list because, frankly, they were questions that were coming in from the chat room, and I want to be responsive to the audience as much as we possibly can. But if I understand, one of your reasons for being here is you got a book you want to promote. And, you know, Scarecrow is blatantly capitalistic. I think everybody in this audience is very much aware of that. And I would like you to take a couple minutes, please, to pitch your book, tell people why they should lay down. First of all, tell the guys, you know, how much they can expect to pay, because obviously that's a lot of that, you know, that's going to determine whether or not, you know, there's interest out there. You know, a lot of these guys are poorer than most. Some of them could probably afford it on beer money. But we should spend a little bit of time promoting your book, because, you know, it obviously, you know, it's a source of revenue, and I like to promote anybody who's got something of interest to the public.
Well, what the book does is, or attempts to do, or what I'm attempting to do, is to take some of the more advanced theoretical concepts in engineering and basically PhD level mathematics and turn this into something that a person with basic technical knowledge can understand, and then basically lay out the whole dynamic and archetype of electricity in a form where people really have like a total grasp of the phenomena. It might not be, you know, because ultimately when we're talking about electricity, we really don't know what we're talking about. We're only dealing with its effects or shadows or its effect on matter. Electricity is a property of space, which in turn makes it a property of the ether, yet our interaction with electricity is only how matter interacts with it. So I'm really not trying to, in the book, to describe what electricity is, because that would be pointless. What I'm trying to do is to show you its overall shape and behavior patterns in a way that uses simple, practical language, simple, practical analogies, and if it's followed through, if the reader follows through at the end when I lead into Tesla's vision of the rotating magnetic field, the reader will experience the exact same vision that Tesla did when he created it. That's what I attempted to do, and I think it will work. You will be inside Tesla's head during his vision, and you will see what he saw.
And over your head in the image that I'm projecting right now, that there is the website ericpdollard.com, and if anybody might be interested in procuring your book, can they expect to find a link at that website where they can lay down their credit card and be the proud owner?
Well, right now the book is still being put together. Okay. So just an hour before we got together here, I finally finished all the pieces. It's been a 4-month straight project, almost 8 hours a day, thousands of pages of notes. It's been a Herculean effort for me to do this. It's literally left me thoroughly exhausted. I think it'll probably take about another month or two to get together, but in about the same time, I have another book coming out which has been suppressed for quite some time, rather viciously, and it relates to my 30 years of work at RCA and Bolinas. And this is pretty much finished. It has been finished for a long time. It's being shuffled around and what have you. It's beaten up a little bit as far as, you know, I don't have my original photographs, and you know, it's not going to be beautiful as far as the pictures go, but it's very thorough, showing the development of radio before the existence of electromagnetism.
Wait a minute. How can there be radio without electromagnetism? I thought the two were hand in hand.
Well, that's what people have been taught to think. But that's not correct. There's actually there's always four components to electricity, and electromagnetism only represents a pair of them.
All right. Is there a comment that you would make? We right now we transmit power long distances using 3 wires. Tesla envisioned a 4-wire system. Do you have a comment on that virtual wire component?
That is the 4-wire system by Tesla got replaced. The 4-wire 4-phase was replaced by the 3-wire 3-phase, which doesn't necessarily match the archetype of electricity, but there's a certain aspect of that geometry that a 3-phase system, the amount of metal in the wire and the transformers and what have you is at its minimum value. Obviously, it uses the least number of wires. And the triangular configuration is a self-referencing structure, so you can remove a transformer from triad on the pole or on the platform or whatever, and the system will still operate. It's got that level of redundancy. But unfortunately, the utility companies are turning the power system inside out, and they're using 4 wires to transmit 3-phase, which now creates a parasitic mode, because if you have more wires than you have phases, that creates another propagating medium. So now not only do you have a 3-phase 60-cycle transmission wave, but you have a 180-cycle single-phase transmission wave overlapping it, and it's not a very good situation.
All righty. Now, getting back to the book, is there a time frame? I mean, this is going out, of course, August 1st, 2013. If I were to tell my audience that if they went to the website ericpdollard.com in, say, 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, when
let me confer on that. So
okay, I'm not trying to hold your feet to the fire and get a firm.
Yeah, I would say.
I can see a couple people out there. How can I buy the damn book? So,
right, well, let me finish it first. But the other book relating to my RCA work, I expect will be out shortly. I'm not certain about that, but I would expect that will be within this month. I just handed 275 notebook pages to somebody to be typed, which is the 4-quadrant book that we've been talking about. So, and he has, I think, over 170 figures and diagrams and pictures to configure in that. This book is going to be very pictorial for people that don't really have the technical knowledge or whatever. Just looking at the pictures will be a course of an electricity itself. So I would say safely 2 months, safely with my RCA work, a month.
All righty. Okay, that's reasonable. Okay, so you guys out there, who keep, pushing the issue, make a note of the website, make a bookmark for it, and, take a look in a couple weeks, maybe a month, and see if maybe the goodies that you're interested in are available for sale. And then it's up to you whether you consider the price reasonable.
Now, the lecture itself is out, so that's a good, prelude to the book.
Understand.
And there's a lot of material in the lecture. So,
understand. So there are materials on that website that an interested party could purchase today if they were so inclined.
Exactly.
All righty. I think that's a fair place to wrap up the book issue. It'll probably come up again in the question and answer session, but that's all right. I would like to move along because we got other material we want to cover. As far as upcoming suppressed material that will be coming. Now, that's a tantalizing reference, okay? When you start talking, suppressed material, we start thinking about, the guys parked out front of my house here in the black Suburban that I have to take donuts to, otherwise they send that damn lily wave down the stream and my computer goes, yeah. Please give us a little bit of a teaser, a little bit of a taste of what the heck we're talking about as far as future publications that might involve technologies that you consider suppressed.
Well, the suppression that I'm facing is, first of all, don't get all wrapped up into this conspiracy theory stuff about the NSA and all that. That's not really how it works.
I hope you were laughing when I was talking about the black Suburban and the donuts,
Well, those people can be your friends or they can be your enemy. It's kind of, it depends on a lot of different things. It depends on
whether or not you got the donuts with the pink sprinkles or not.
Yeah, it's simple, basic,
As long as you got the right damn donuts and Arabica bean coffee, everything's cool.
Yeah, but I don't want to really knock them and make fools out of them.
I'll knock them and make fools out of them.
The thing is
you don't have to. I'll do it.
The opposition seems to come from private organizations, mostly in the environmental realm. Unfortunately, they wheedle their way into government positions and manipulate the government to do the things that makes the government look bad, when actually it's these embedded political organizations, environmental organizations, and they seem, the proverbial they in this case, as described, really seem to have a very strong opposition to any radio history before RCA in 1920, and they're actively trying to get their way into radio historical societies, Navy historical restoration projects, and put their people in, and then block any access to what's left of those facilities. And then somebody like myself, who was the master of all that, is a major threat to these people. So I'm constantly hounded by them. I'm going through this again right now. It's an extremely destructive process. I think everybody's pretty much familiar with it by now because it's all over the internet. The whole thing's all happening over again. It would have the appearance that it's just a collection of manipulating sick individuals without any, outside influence or whatever to suppress my work. But that's one aspect of how your work gets suppressed, because my situation is I'm kind of like a golden goose. And the thing is once you get your hand on the egg, it seems to be the social mind virus is then to kill the goose or get rid of it or whatever. So that's what I'm going through now is get my name, get access to my work, get control of my materials, publicly defame me, push me out of the situation, disrupt my ability to get money for my work, and then run off with my stuff and promote it in their behalf, but then I'm just a piece of garbage. So that's one suppression element. Another suppression element, like I say, is the paragovernmental, environmental, and political groups, a kind of a communist type of thing, like I grew up with in the 50s and 60s. It turns out to be some of those things that the John Birchers were saying and all that actually weren't quite that crazy. So I have that particular aspect. As far as the government goes, I've had some really weird things happen, with helicopters and all that. Rarely, but otherwise, the big boys, the guys that drive the black Suburbans, seem actually more helpful to me. The government problems mostly come from localized agencies which are agitated by other forces to act upon harassing, landowners or whatever, or, and then you get a county government type of thing or a city government because, you have these persnickety little individuals in their planning departments, or, just take a trip to the Department of Motor Vehicles and the species presents itself clearly.
I have some understanding of that complexity.
Yeah, now, I think that's a common one.
Yeah, I'm one of those evil upper middle class types who has to do quarterly filings too. So I have to deal with taxman on a quarterly basis too. So that's always fun. The interesting thing is a big corporation can claim just about anything as a corporate expense, but when you're a small independent, man, I tell you what, they get out the proctoscope and the rubber gloves. We do want to discuss some of the more exotic technologies that you've got on your plate. Specifically the items that were in the punch list that we wanted to cover was the items referred to as telluric research, earthquake study, advanced earthquake warning systems, and radio telescopes for receiving signals from inside the Earth. Now these are technologies that a lot of people are going to scratch their head and say, "What the hell is he talking about?" So perhaps we could spend a little bit of time covering, what these technologies are, what the benefits of them might provide, and how you can help bring these about.
Well, telluric basically means something relating to the inside of the Earth. It's, see how to put this. So basically, as we have lightning storms which occur in the part of the Earth which we can call the earth-ionosphere. They use the word earth-ionosphere waveguide. I prefer, in Tesla's terms, it's the earth-ionosphere condenser or capacitor. And in that space, there's a continuum of electrostatic discharges and waves and very powerful forces when they manifest. They're often very destructive. Same thing goes on inside the Earth. and the one inside the Earth acts as a conjugate with the one going on outside the Earth. So they're not isolated, but they're not identical. They work in relation with each other. And being the Earth materially inside is a more of an inductive and conductive medium, is these massive rivers of electricity are constantly surging through the interior of the Earth, and this is what produces the Earth's magnetic field. So now when you have a situation where, if lightning strikes the ground, okay, waves are going to propagate inside the Earth. So you can look at the inside of the Earth as another type of radio medium, and this is how Tesla envisioned his first transmission system, was to use the inside of the Earth rather than the outside as the propagating medium, and he succeeded at that. I've duplicated it, which as far as transmitting industrial quantities of power go. That's not something that I'm really working on or have the ability to work on, and it might not be such a good idea. But this is what I started learning at RCA at an early age because of the pre-RCA systems that RCA Station and Bolinas inherited of Marconi and Alexanderson. Now, Alexanderson's system leads to the transmission mechanisms that were initially applied to naval submarine communications, and this is how I came about my discoveries, is these naval submarine signals as they exist today are influenced by earthquakes and other things that go on inside the Earth. And that, in fact, the Earth has its own system of radio waves. And in a process of redeveloping the Alexanderson antenna and making improvements on it, I have actually managed to build an electric structure which serves as a radio telescope for viewing the inside of the Earth and receiving these particular signals that it generates and correlating that with the earthquake activity. And it's a very definite 1 to 2 day precursor for any earthquake of, basically 6 magnitude or larger. So what's good is it doesn't really give you false alarms on smaller earthquakes, and the underground electrical activity is pretty much confined to a 200-mile area. As far as being able to receive it, I had a massive research facility. I valued about $1.5 million where I've studied this stuff, and it was basically beginning to operate as a civil defense facility for this. And then the trustee of the property sold it out from underneath me, and life's work was destroyed, and I don't know how to get back into this. So this has basically put a stop to my research in this area. The location was Landers. The first test of the system just happened to be that there was the Landers earthquake, which was massive. And this thing gave...
Is there a way that such a device or array...
It's not a device, it's a system.
Okay, is there a way it can actually predict the location of the earthquake as well as its potential intensity? Or is it just like a smoke alarm that, hey, there's smoke, can't really tell you where the fire is, but there is some smoke. How accurate is it?
Well, one system will not determine location, but as soon as you start to use a multiplicity of systems and then compare the phase angle, you can locate it directly. So I had
it'd be like triangulation. You have to triangulate.
Yeah, triangulation.
Okay.
So you can figure out where this is going to come from. And I haven't got to that point. Now I have no stations. I'm attempting with some basic level of governmental help to put at least a model antenna back together so I can demonstrate the principles. But to put all this back together is a pretty large effort. The antenna structure itself is pretty easy. It looks like the old long-distance telephone lines that used to have the glass insulators you'd see run along the road. There's basically... Visually, it looks no different than that, except that
how big? I mean, how many acres of land are we talking about?
Well, they're lineal. I did have the opportunity to acquire a 66-mile stretch of J carrier line, but it was very difficult to get all the paperwork and the business end for that. And then the usual forces came in and made an absolute mess out of it for me. I have in the process now to get a 2-mile right away on abandoned poles, and then to harvest the remains out in the desert of these old lines and install that The basic financing for it is there, but the business end financing is I'm going to have to make a money raising effort because of there's a lot of complexities when you got miles and miles of lines running out in the desert. Is you have to have all these permits, and it's not an easy process. Sometimes it can take 10 to 20 years. But being that the project that I have is significant, I'm trying to be helped along in that. Unfortunately, all this disruption which is going on now is really jeopardizing the entire project. But there's always just taking a roll of field telephone wire and going out in the middle of Death Valley and just some ground rods and throwing something together, to listen to. I do that with my car. I have my car, inside of my car is a virtual electronics communication station, so I have ways to, remotely build structures that I can hear the signals, but I can't really study them. I don't have the spectrum analyzers. I don't have chart recorders. Now, another thing I had at Landers is I believe I have the world's most sensitive seismograph, the mechanical end of it. It was probably be somewhere about 500 million times more sensitive than the normal USGS seismograph. Instead of taking the seismograph microphone, hooking it straight to the recorder, as I developed a special type of high-gain amplifier, which basically worked like the front end of a radar receiver or a satellite receiver, and I was able to study during this 10-year interval when this station was operating the Earth as a single vibratory object. And there's a lot of very interesting things that come out of looking at it that way. I put it on an oscilloscope like the heartbeat oscilloscopes that people may have seen in the hospital with the lagging trace. And just like electrically, the ground under your feet is in constant activity. The waves on the scope look like you're on a ship in the water, and there's impulses and transients and surges, and I kind of would do sometimes, when I could get myself up for it, I do like these poor guys used to have to do during the Cold War in the Air Force radar rooms, is sit there with your face staring into an oscilloscope for 4 hours straight, looking for enemy missiles. In this case, I was studying seismic vibrations, and the knowledge I gained was absolutely fantastic. And this I am integrating in with the telluric electric method and using the two of them together. Not only, in the Landers case, it gave the precursors. In the Northridge case, it gave the precursors. The Japanese quake was so strong that even though my telluric system was designed for a 200 and some odd mile range, the ground there was so electrified that I picked up an ionospheric propagation all the way in California 2 days beforehand, which would indicate that the earthquake would have been in San Francisco. I was in the Southern California area. I had no way to triangulate it. 1 hour after that started, the first Japanese earthquake occurred. It did not stop the intense electrical activity on the overground antenna that I was picking up from the ionosphere. It persisted, and then 2 days later was the big blast, and then the overground electrical activity ceased after that. Now, if I'm picking that up ionospherically, and the ionosphere is not necessarily conducive to propagating those signals, if it was that strength, a system like mine in Japan would have just gone nuts when this electric process had started there, and it would have alerted everybody that this was happening. But see, unfortunately, the USGS is very opposed to this type of stuff. They could be part of the problem. It's kind of, it is coincidental, I believe, that my installation was destroyed several weeks after the Japanese earthquake, but that could have been, because the land was sold out from underneath me or whatever. But there was evidence to indicate that a group of people were trying to sabotage my operation there. So I don't really know what to say. The problem is now I have nothing. I don't know how I could put something like that together. I'm trying as fast as I can to get out on this website the pictures of the installation, which of course no longer exists. So at least people will have an idea of what I'm capable of building. They'll see the massive quantity of work involved. Basically, I built my own Navy base, and it was a pretty severe operation to build and have to operate all that by myself. But I did, and the results were fantastic. So now I have to figure out how to do all that over again. I'm 61 years old. The equipment can't be found. There's no, the next big California quake is going to occur in this decade.
I'll tell you, on that note, I am going to go ahead and pop an image up here. This is an image of the proposed cover for Eric's book that's going to be coming out. That book should be available, Kentucky Windage Best Guess, probably within the next couple of months. There is material at ericpdollard.com that is available now. Anybody out there who has been intrigued by Eric's presentation tonight and might wish to make a contribution to these efforts, you can communicate directly with Eric at General Delivery, Lone Pine, California, 83545. And
that zip code's not correct.
Oh, it's not? No, give me the right one, man. I got a banner up there on screen, and I've screwed up.
No, it's 9. Starts with 9.
So it's 9-3. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get it right. If we're going to get it, let's get it right. Okay, guys, correction. That zip code is 93545. And continuing on here. Now, there was we do have a number of people in the audience who have they've been throwing the questions out there in the chat room so damn fast I can't keep up with them. Okay, so we are. I'm hoping you're going to be patient with me and make at least 10 minutes or so, 15 at best, to field some questions from the live audience. There are quite a few, and I'm going to ask the audience. Please be reasonable. I don't read that fast. I'm an old man. I'm wearing trifocals. Damn it, slow down. But you did wish to address. Okay, there's been a lot of mudslinging going around, and frankly, I'm going to point the finger at you. I'm going to point the finger at this guy Murakami, and I'm going to point the finger at this guy Savant. Frankly, as far as I'm concerned, you're all throwing mud at each other, and it ought to stop. It's childish. It's silly. I've seen enough of it. Frankly, it's boring me to tears. But, the stuff's been so damn thick that we probably should take a moment. Please, state your case on this. Put your argument on the table. Hopefully we're not going to get involved in any more name-calling and nonsense, because to be honest with you, there's been enough of that. But, as the central conductor of this particular issue, I think the folks would like to hear from you what your take on it is. So please, a couple minutes on that issue. Hopefully, it won't it won't become a midget mud wrestling bout.
Well, the thing is, there really is no conflict and there's no fight. I've hardly said anything about it at all. I'm not involved in this stuff. I don't have a computer. I don't read email or any of that. I live in the forest in my car or out in the desert. It's not really part of my life. But unfortunately, what these people are doing is they're sending defamatory letters to my coworkers, my business people, creating this whole image that, probably, one of the most productive people in my life right now is Aaron, that's finally helping me get all this stuff out. And that's why they despise him. And you have to realize the harassment this guy's going under. So you have to expect, that he's going to be throwing something back. For me, I just look at it as the ninth destruction of all my work. These people are monsters. They lied to me. They connived and tricked. I'm not happy about it at all. I hope they all get eaten by worms. And then really that's about all there is to it. There is no argument. These people are trying to screw me up. And they're doing a very good job of it. A lot of the energetic forum people that, I try to work with to get to build things and stuff are, all disappearing off the thing. They're all hooped up, this or that. It's, people send me emails that they received, saying that, I'm addicted to methamphetamines and that the people I associate with are worthless and that I'm just lying around and not doing anything and I'm spending money that's not mine. The whole thing is and they're relentless at it. It's a constant thing. And then they turn around with their forked tongue, and they come out and say that we're trying to help Eric. Well, I have to make reference to the movie Mars Invades, where the Martians are running around incinerating people while the loudspeakers are blaring, "We are your friends." And I'm sick of it, and it might be enough that I just decide not to talk to anybody anymore, because what am I going to do? I mean, it's gotten into everybody I know, and everybody that I work with is getting phone calls and letters, and then the people that are originating that are turning around and saying, "Oh, we're trying to help Eric," and this and that, and they've made quite a mess out of the whole situation and tricked me into something that I never really wanted to get involved with to begin with.
All righty. You said your piece?
That's it.
All right. That issue is done. Now, checking the time. We've run about the normal course of a normal Smart Scarecrow show. And it would probably be appropriate at this point if we turn a little bit of time over to the live audience. We do right now have, it appears, 83 active participants in the chat room. Now, guys, I know a lot of you have posted questions up, but frankly, they went by so darn fast I couldn't see them. All right, here comes a legitimate question. Let's see what we got here. What was the frequency range of the observed Earth waves, and were they periodic, or did they exhibit any patterns? An interesting question. I'm not sure if it's relevant or not, but please, is that one you can address?
Yeah, it starts off, the normal background emissions are what are called impulses, or aperiodic. There's not really much of an oscillation. They appear to be lightning discharges inside the Earth, or lightning in discharges that strike the Earth. What happens when the earthquake situation builds up is then the signals start to get more of a pitch to them. They ring a little more and they chirp, and then the frequencies of the Earth start to coalesce around the original Alexanderson transmission frequencies of about 18 kilocycles. So right below the Navy submarine communications band, these signals will start to coalesce around that frequency. Now, you have to remember, this is not picked up by a conventional antenna. This is picked up by an Alexanderson structure. So to try to get these signals using electromagnetic antenna would be futile. So you can't separate them from the other waves or whatever. So
trying to compare this to an electromagnetic frequency, there's no real correlation?
No, these are magnetodielectric. So what I have is a pair of transmission structures. One's called an Alexanderson antenna and one's called a Beveridge antenna. The Beveridge antenna picks up all the stuff from the surface of the earth-ionosphere. The Alexanderson antenna picks up everything from the surface of the Earth to its interior. So that way then I can tell what's coming from the outside and inside. I built a type of dimensional stereo, and you could actually put on the stereo headphones and hear the Earth ring and oscillate and click in stereo in this waveform reality. So a lot of the stuff that people are attributing to Schumann resonance and earth-ionosphere waveguide, I found these signals are actually coming from inside the Earth. Now, as the stress that causes the earthquake continues to develop, these signals become more and more like alternating currents until eventually they become actual sine waves or harmonic waveforms, usually about 4 or 5 hours before the actual blast. And then being that they're coherent, then they get picked up on the spectrum analyzer and the filters, and then that goes into the graphical recorders that show that these waveforms are existing. Then at a certain point it sets off an alarm. And then, when the alarm goes off, you know that something's going to happen. Right, so I've heard earthquakes, some earthquakes would coalesce around 350, 400 cycles a second. The Landers earthquake coalesced around 1,800 cycles a second. But all this begins at 18 kilocycles and starts to work its way down and become more and more oscillatory until what was just static impulses finally turns into a form of alternating current.
Okay, well that leads into another question that came up. You've apparently done some work with Schumann resonance, which you mentioned. Is there a way to use that in a practical way that will not invite a visit from the U.S. government? That's an interesting way to put the question.
Well, that's kind of out of the subject because the Schumann resonance stuff is not inside the Earth; it's outside the Earth.
Okay.
Pretty much, the submarine communications all drops off at the transition point between the Alexanderson frequency 18 kilocycles, where above 18 kilocycles the electric activity exists outside the Earth, and below 18 kilocycles the electrical activity exists inside the Earth.
All right, here's an interesting one. This is from one of our anonymous cowards out there. Let's see. Yeah, that tape's moving so fast I can't keep up with it. Can you tell us how RCA suppressed the Tesla technology? It keeps moving up off the screen. And can you say if your recent troubles might be the same thing happening? The same thing that happened to Tesla and Marconi. I'm not sure about that question, but
well, that's a sensible question. RCA did not suppress Tesla technology because Tesla technology had already ceased to exist. Once Tesla took the bite at Wardenclyffe, that was the end of it. What happened after that is then you started getting all these harebrained experimenters and charlatans and what have you. Predominant amongst them is Lee De Forest, probably one of the biggest frauds in radio history, even though he did come up with the 3-electrode vacuum tube. You had Marconi, who was trying to monopolize the whole thing. You had other people like Fessenden, who came up with their own radio systems, and then you had God knows what else. I mean, and then people were experimenting, and the interference and the radiation and the problems finally got to the point where at the onset of World War I, the Navy was really disgusted. I think the Navy ultimately wanted the Tesla system. They had to deal with all this crap. They threw Marconi out of the country. They seized all his stations, and then, unfortunately, a not-so-nice person named Franklin Delano Roosevelt was Assistant Secretary of the Navy at the time, and he made radio illegal. You have to remember back in 1917, radio wasn't in tuning in your favorite, FM broadcast station. None of that existed. It was people, with spark gaps and weird, bottles filled with sulfuric acid and strange electrodes and things like out of a Frankenstein movie that had weird ways of propagating, ultimately most of which were not electromagnetic. So what the Navy did, stop the patent wars, which had gone insane, stop all the lies and the fraud, the equipment that didn't work. They got together with General Electric, and between Steinmetz and Alexanderson, they decided to start on a workable system. They had Bell Telephone basically buy out DeForest, work with General Electric to develop the vacuum tubes, and then in 1919, the Radio Corporation was formed by the United States Navy, under the control of General Electric as the holder for all radio technology, but by then Tesla was forgotten and gone. Enough of his stuff had been plagiarized and copied that his basic system existed, because that's the only thing that would work, was something that was configured the way that he specified. All the misrepresentations and things that didn't work got weeded out of the way, and then RCA immediately abandoned the Alexanderson system and went strictly electromagnetic radio, and that became the radio of today. Now, oddly enough, when I was in high school, the Radio Corporation station in Bolinas took me on, gave me a free run of the station, provided me with all my materials, books, education, anything I needed. I could go there in the morning, grab the key ring, unsupervised, go in any transformer vault, transmitters, whatever, leave there with a carload of equipment at the end of the day. It was very helpful to me. So when I got out of the Navy, the complication was Sarnoff had died, which didn't do RCA any good. Not that Sarnoff did anybody any good either, but, his company was my patron. And the satellite business, I was supposed to begin to help them design and install the satellite station. The company was falling apart, so the district vice president put it on me, come up with a new radio so that RCA has something where they can, have a new technology and then keep the basic point-to-point and ship-to-shore communication business going without the satellites. So they provided everything I needed, but the company died on me, and others came in like MCI and General Electric, and later kept the station operating. The call letters were KPH. It's a very famous station. And after about 20 some odd years of work on and off there, and my laboratories in Borderland, in Santa Barbara, and whatever, I finally perfected this system. And it turns out to be because the original Marconi and Alexanderson grounding system was there, which is thousands of acres, including metal plates buried out to sea next to the San Andreas Fault, was all still intact. It turned out to be that Bolinas was supposed to receive the Tesla Wardenclyffe Tower. And RCA and myself had unwittingly reinvented Tesla. And it was supposed to happen there, and about the time that I was ready to do the first ship-to-shore test, the station license was abducted by the competitor, and Greenpeace came in and threw me out and took the place over and screwed up all the equipment that would be necessary to do this, and that was the end of that.
Interesting. Well, back to the questions, and there's been about a zillion of them fly through there. Let's see here. This one from MRTNED. I'm not sure how to say that. That's all right. Electrically, how did you get the synchronous motors to run ahead of phase, as you stated in your lecture? I believe you mentioned a field rheostat. Can you elaborate?
Okay, well, now in a synchronous machine, you have the rotating magnetic field around the outside, the ring, which is called the armature. In this case, in this type of machine, the armature is stationary, and that's where the main power wires connect. So you have a synchronous speed, alternating current, rotating magnetic field, and then you have a magnet in the center, or a series of magnets like spokes, which are driven by a DC power supply that controls their strength and magnetism. Now, there'll be a certain level of magnetism where that rotor will be in a positional step with the rotating magnetic field. In other words, the peak of the rotating field will correspond to the pole of the rotor. Now, if there's a deficiency of magnetism, the rotor will be offset in phase behind the rotating field. If there's an excess of excitation magnetism, it will push the rotor ahead. Now, if the rotor is falling behind, it tends to be a consumptive machine. It wants to operate more like a motor. If the rotor is being pushed ahead, it's more of a generating machine, so that's when it becomes a generator. But the unique property of the synchronous machine, if it's not falling behind or pushing ahead, but it's just cocked at an angle, is the machine will either act as a magnetic inductance or electrostatic capacitor. So you can start to split the alternating current waves into basically reflected standing waves or whatever in the transmission system by controlling the phase. And it has very interesting effects on the power system, and the power company actually utilizes this to keep their power system energized, because it takes energy has to flow to charge the electric field of the transmission structures, to charge the magnetic fields of the transformers, to charge the iron cores and all the motors and the refrigerators and the appliances and the little transformers in your computers. So rather than having the generating station do that and consume fuel, you use a synchronous machine or a bank of electrostatic condensers like I was describing in the beginning with the power company, and then it's kind of like a free energy of a certain sorts, but technically it's called free power. So this particular apparatus that we're discussing keeps the power system energized so that actually only the demand of the customer appears as a demand on the generator.
All right. One interesting question here. I'm not sure exactly how to phrase this because the way it's typed. What does the energy particle look like from your experience and characteristic? Plasma, photon, or particle physics? Does energy have a particulate nature? I think would be a more appropriate way to phrase that question.
Not really. And energy itself is only a mathematical abstraction of an electrical unit, which I call the Planck. Something that Steinmetz pointed out in his books is the union of magnetism and dielectricity gives you the same dimensions as what's called energy time, which is referred to what's called Planck's constant. So I wrote a whole book on electrical theory that originates from that particular concept called the Lone Pine Writings, which is now flying around out of my control like some kind of runaway coyote. I don't know how people can get a hold of it or how I can get any of the money I was supposed to get out of it, but that's where I introduced the concept of the Planck. In that case, when you have a union of two ether situations of where you have a circulatory magnetic loop and you have a dielectric electrostatic stress, which cross according to electromagnetism at a point, there will be a union there which you can equate to a photon and give it the dimensions of the Planck. And if the ether is a particulate situation or can lead to a particulate situation, then this energy multiplied by time, or the product of magnetism and dielectricity, more appropriately, could exist as some kind of bounded device or thing that you might want to call a particle. But that's all very theoretical. It's best to stay away from that.
In deference to my guest, Eric, we have been going at this for an hour now. If you raise your hand and say, "I'm beat," we're done. Okay? But we do have more questions. Can we continue?
Oh yeah, I'm all wound up on a nice big cup of coffee, so you can keep cranking them out.
So you're okay. So we're rolling.
Yeah.
We're rolling.
But I do have to make dinner in about a half hour, so.
All right. Well, I don't want to, I don't want to intrude. We have gotten an hour of your time, and I don't want to be intrusive. But the questions are coming fast and furious. Here's an interesting one regarding earthquake prediction. Regarding earthquake prediction via detecting electrical effects associated with them, do you have any apprentices who look promising to be able to enlarge on the work you've done in that area? I think what they're thinking. Okay, look, man. You, like me, is an old geezer, and you probably shouldn't be wandering around out there climbing poles and pulling wire. I mean, is there a young fella that you've been training to be your apprentice who might be able to take over some of this heavy lifting for you?
Well, the thing is I enjoy climbing poles and pulling wire and all that kind of stuff, and you really need to do that to keep alive because, you have to remember that I don't live in a house, I live outside. So that's kind of like a normal thing. Anyway, that's how I have fun. See, people normally think of that stuff as work, but for me, that's how I have fun. I do have two younger people, one person in particular that are very interested in getting involved in this project. Will make it a lot easier for me, assuming that I can get it together to even build this thing, because right now, all the harassment and whatever you want to call all this stuff is kind of making it hard for me to do business because of the negative letters and the defamatory stuff. So,
in my case, it has more to do with being brittle. I'm afraid if I fell, I just don't bounce as good as I used to.
Oh, I got no problem. So I live on. I'm on a living food diet. I basically can run with the coyotes and live like they do. None of that stuff affects me. So there's no problem there. If I fall to the ground, I just bounce.
All righty. All right, moving right along. Would you mind commenting on the extent to which the crazy weather and climate phenomena we are seeing on the planet is a function of geoengineering? And they're pointing the finger at HAARP and chemtrails and weather control. Is that something you have any impressions of or would like to make a comment on?
All that stuff's complete gobbledygook. What's going on is an unfortunate circumstance for us radio people is the sun is going dead. The solar cycles are ending. The sun is going to go into an extremely quiet period here, and what it's doing, which I can kind of attest to because I have to live out there in it in my car, is it's getting progressively colder. So the whole global warming thing is kind of a big chuck. The HAARP thing and the angels don't play this HAARP and all that stuff is pure crap. I just have to say it right now, and I really can't even get nasty enough about it. It is pure crap. Jerry Vassilatos wrote a book called Secrets of Cold War Technology that begins by analyzing the mind of the conspiracy nut and why they're have to keep cooking this stuff up, and then finally through his study of the patents and talking to me and learning about RCA and Marconi and Tesla and what have you, is he pretty much indicates what the HAARP's about, When my station was together at Landers, it was a complete electric sensing facility, so all frequencies from very low down to about 300 cycles a second up to basically about 5,000 megacycles were constantly under observation, and the HARP is quite present on my spectrum analyzer. It's used very little. It has absolutely nothing to do with Tesla whatsoever. This is no intent on manipulating the weather or screwing anything up. If you want to control humans between Foster Farms chickens and the flashing orange and blue lights that are constantly hitting you from the TV screen, that's all the mind control and sickness generating technology you need. You don't need to be screwing up the atmosphere. But then again, if everybody has to drive around in a 6-wheel pickup truck that's as empty as their head, how long will it poison the entire be before it poisons the entire Earth? You go anywhere anymore, you can't see the stars at night, which almost has religious significance. The airline pilots will tell you this pink haze now covers the entire Earth. So between the sun going dead and mankind's gluttony for aggressive, savage devices that growl like animals and consume large quantities of fossil fuel, something's got to screw up. But then I want to point out one other thing about all this carbon dioxide and global warming and all that crap. Those are the people that are causing me most of the trouble in my research. I should point that out. They're highly organized and dangerous. They have a president in office. The thing is, the problem with carbon dioxide, there's less carbon dioxide in the air than there is argon. The fraction is like 0.03% or something unbelievably ridiculous. I don't know how the plant life is surviving, with a complete lack of what it needs. If you look back in the geological clock, we have what was called the Carboniferous era, where the plants and bugs reigned, and the plants drew all the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and just to be nasty, I would say it's God's plan for man to be here to put all the carbon dioxide in the air that it possibly can to make the Earth a paradise again, which is green and food grows everywhere and it's nice and warm, and so everything is kind of backwards from.
There just won't be any people here to enjoy it, huh?
Well, I mean, the people would be here to enjoy it. They would enjoy it even better. It'd be like going back to the Garden of Eden, but unfortunately, people just seem to want to destroy each other, so there probably won't be any people here to enjoy it.
An interesting question here. Are you familiar with the electric universe theory, and do you have any impressions that you'd like to share regarding that theory of the cosmos?
I'm not particularly up on exactly what's written about it or whatever, but as far as a universe being an electrical operation, it's to me, from my research with the cosmic induction generator and my study of solar terrestrial activity and the effects on radio waves and all that, is the electrical forces in the universe are not only a predominant force, but exist at an intensity and scope that's beyond the physical objects that fill the universe. So it's definitely an electrical universe, and it's created electrically.
Alrighty. Got somebody apparently is familiar with some of your presentations, because this question appears to be based on some talk you've given in the past. Can you talk a little about the analog computer, and if it is possible to use that circuit to rip apart the dielectric material in capacitors at one end of the circuit, especially if that material is water?
Yes, the analog computer is a way to, let's say I have a 100-mile power line that goes between towns. That power line will contain a certain amount of magnetism, and it will contain a certain amount of dielectricity, and it will move at a certain speed, and there'll be a ratio between those two quantities. Those are the parameters that define that power line. Now, what I can do, instead of using all those miles and miles of wire, which enclose all that thousands and thousands of acres of space that constitutes the electric field, is I can take little coils and little capacitors that have the same amount of magnet or dielectric storage capability, because they have iron cores or they're filled with oil or things that magnify those forces, is I can simulate that line on a workbench. And if the stresses of 110,000 volt power line with 300 amps flowing in it can be handled by those devices, then I can produce all the million volt transients and the other things that would normally be found on that power line. Now, the thing is, we were talking initially, you were put back by, something other than electromagnetism. Well, all this telluric stuff in Tesla and everything we've been talking about is not electromagnetic. So what's interesting is you can build analog structures which duplicate the non-electromagnetic waves and then study them. And instead of using miles and miles of transmission line or giant transformers with, hundreds of miles of wire wound in them, you can build these networks to do the same thing and produce the very powerful forces that are normally created by a Tesla transformer with an analog equivalent of it. And I have demonstrated this on video.
Alrighty, I hope that answers that question. Let me see here. With an earthquake, what is causing the EM activity? I assume they mean electromagnetic. And go ahead.
Yeah, it's not electromagnetic. It's electrostatic, and the propagation velocity is undefined. As an example, if a lightning strike occurs, let's say 100 miles away from my installation in Landers, it comes in the underground antenna before the overground antenna. When it comes in on the overground antenna, the farther away, the weaker it is. When it comes in on the underground antenna, there's very little change in strength. So this starts to show the characteristic of a non-electromagnetic, or what I refer to as a magnetodielectric transmission. So can you rephrase the question again, or repeat it again, because I forgot the important part of that.
Oh man, I've already lost the question.
Okay.
They're going so darn fast. Here's
what he asked.
Here's another one that kind of relates.
Okay.
Does Eric think that the narrow shafts and resonant chambers and large magnetic stone structures at the Giza complex in Egypt might be something to do with telluric or earth currents? The technology of old and new, as Tesla said. Okay, I'm not,
Well, that is quite possible. If you build a structure that picks this up. Now, one thing I'd like to point out, somewhat in relation to that, is out in the desert you have these things called crystal hills, which are outcroppings of quartz veins. And if it's very, very quiet, no wind or whatever, and you're out far away, and you park yourself on top of one of those and let your ears become relaxed, you can actually hear the telluric signals. So now if you built a structure, and you have to remember that not all of the pyramids there is probably a layer of quartz and gold that covered the whole thing that actually, brought it into a full electrical being. So a lot of that stuff's been all ripped out. Now the thing is, people always ask me, where do these signals come from? How are they generated? Well, that's a real complex situation, because why would you have an 8,000 cycle sine wave? How can that be generated when they tell you the Schumann resonance is all down there on 8 cycles? So that really opens up a whole can of worms. It can't be generated by any mechanism that can be understood. I'm thinking quite possibly what it is metallic veins are structured in such a way to Earth to act as resonators and could be possibly producing these signals. I can't say it because I have no way of getting in there, and I don't have any antennas to study it, not alone a multiplicity of antennas to find where it's coming from. So it's a very interesting question. Now one thing to really throw everybody off that loves physics and Einstein and all these things is my seismographs. Basically, and the frequencies indicate to me that the Earth is hollow. And that is how these waveforms are coming about, is because there's an inner boundary as well as an outer boundary, and there's quite possibly a sun in the center of the Earth. So we have a whole electrical dynamic inside the Earth. We can look at it as a horse and carrot. Is the electrical forces generating the earthquake, or the earthquake generating the electrical forces? And then by the law of reciprocity, they both generate each other. So we're dealing with, a situation that requires a lot of study and measurement, and that's like beyond me now, and don't expect any help from, the so-called agencies, particularly the U.S. Geological Service, to help you with any of this. They'll do everything they can to destroy you. In fact, actually in California, earthquake prediction is illegal. The system at Landers was, of course, never really meant to be a Chicken Little to scream to people that the earthquake's coming. It was designed to work more as a weather forecasting mode, earthquake forecasting system. The name for the system is Advanced Seismic Warning, ASW, which kind of rhymes with the Navy anti-submarine warfare because it really did derive out of submarine radio communications technology. So these are all the things you have to deal with on this. It's not just a simple, this is what's happening, that's what's happening condition.
Let me see here. What arrangements as far as underground antennas and above ground antennas would one use to receive earthquakes? I think they're asking for a physical description of what type of receiving apparatus would be required. Have been listening to lightning phenomena via VLF for years. He finishes up that comment with that. But I think what he's looking for is he wants to develop a mental picture of what this antenna that he would have to construct would look like.
Well, it's kind of, it's an Alexanderson antenna that works over a broad range of frequencies. So you would have to study the Alexanderson antenna to get an idea of what it's basically like. I'm not really, quite ready to give out exactly how this structure works. I did invent it. It uses mathematical concepts that nobody knows about, and it's kind of it's kept for, maybe you might say, government use only. That's what I was pointing out about the earthquake thing, is you can't just run around and tell people there's going to be earthquakes. So you have to work with whatever agencies. In my case, I was developing the system for the utility companies. So they would know about this beforehand, so they could have their finger on the button close by one day, on the gas line valves and the circuit breakers on the electrical, so that, once the process of the earthquake began, then the circuit shut down without any, delay or wondering what's going on. That's about as far as I wanted to take it.
Okay, let's see here. This is from Zero Fossil Fuel. I'm very interested in the three-phase experiments Eric did in high school, where parasitic oscillations, a mosquito just flew by, parasitic oscillations blew up his transformer. Was the transformer delta Y, delta delta, Y?
No, it's not. I wasn't using three-phase. The complication was RCA would give me these giant transmitters. The transformers were three-phase, but I had the normal, what's called single-phase, which is not really a good way to say it. It's two-phase, because the phases are the number of wires, and there's two wires. So I had 230 volts, single-phase. I had a three-coil transformer, so what am I going to do? So I fooled around, and I found what I had to do is I had to short-circuit the center windings of the transformer, and then the two outer windings were connected to each leg of the 220, and then the four rectifier tubes, two were connected to one phase and two were connected to the other phase to give the so-called bridge rectifier. Now what would happen is when I would hit the start button and the start contactor would close, this was basically, I built a 3.3 thousand volt DC substation in my parents' garage, so this thing was kind of, it scared the neighbors and did things that terrified people, and it really had quite an impact on the line voltage in the neighborhood too when I fired it up.
Messed up a few TVs too.
Well, that came later with other things. So I was blacking out television reception for miles. But what happened was
1.21 gigawatt spark gap probably tear up some TVs.
So, there was no sparks. This was all, HF transmitting equipment given me by RCA, and I was doing my Tesla studies with it. I didn't know who Tesla was, but I had accidentally rediscovered his whole transformer thing. So that's what I was doing, and that caused its own problems. But what would happen was I hit the start button on this thing, and then sometimes the DC charging growl in the transformer, when you first turn them on, they make this ominous growl because the direct current transient's trapped in the core, and it has to leak out through the winding resistance. So normally the growl dampens out and it turns into a normal rectifier hum, but other times the growl gets louder and louder and louder. And I didn't catch this the first time, and the 3.3 thousand volts turned into 25,000 volts, and the transformer would have sparks jumping all over it, and it would jump through the insulation of the wires, and I couldn't figure out why this came about. And I go back out to RCA, and everybody'd scratch their head like they always do when I go out there and tell them the things that I made out of their equipment. They loved it, but it was fascinating, but nobody could give me an answer. And then I learned later on, by studying, the mathematical end of it, is I had produced what's called a parametric oscillator, where the central core, the problem came about because RCA did not give me, $150 rectifier tubes that were new. They gave me their pullouts. So they didn't really, the mercury vapor rectifiers wouldn't start at the same time on the cycle. So they weren't firing together, but one would fire a little early or a little late, and then that residual DC would get trapped in that central shorted core and cause a buildup in there. And then I started getting this parametric oscillation because the core was alternately being saturated and unsaturated, and the transformer started to modulate itself and gave the appearance of synthesizing energy in the process, because the whole rectifier would just, until I at least hit the circuit breaker, the rectifier would become out of control and blow itself up. So that's why recently I've been heavily...
We lose more rectifiers that way.
Yeah, I've been promoting this as a possible way. I do not use the term free energy. I call it energy synthesis, to use parametric variation in magnetic amplifiers and things like that to try to study this effect. And there's a couple of people I know, one person in particular that's really built a lot of apparatus in this area, and it's got a lot of interesting effects, but he's kind of sidetracked on that right now. But I basically have been encouraging people that, and writing papers and presenting them on the energetic forum with diagrams and what have you, as that's a possible avenue of experimentation to produce an energy synthesizing device. Or the way I look at it, if you want to defy the law of conservation of energy, you can do it in two ways. You can either create it or destroy it. And I've seen many more circumstances in my years and years of electrical work of energy disappearing for no explainable reason than appearing. So that's kind of where all that's at. That's a wide open avenue for electrical people to experiment. But you will have to be some level of electrical engineer to understand these things. You can't just grab a bunch of wire and do it. There's just too many things to know.
Here's an interesting one. A little over my head, but maybe you'll understand what he's talking about. For the Crystal Radio Initiative, basically we are broadcasting on the AM band at a specific frequency. This because the signal is immune to phase shift, and it's framed as a question. For the Crystal Radio Initiative, basically we are broadcasting on the AM band at a specific frequency. This because the signal is immune to a phase shift, and it's being presented as a question.
Well, I don't know. The question the phase shift thing I don't quite understand what he's saying.
Yeah, to be honest with you, that kind of went over my head too. I thought
well, it's kind of confusing. I think he might be saying that the propagation delay would be different in that mode. That's one thing I'm encouraging people to look for. The Crystal Radio Initiative was designed to bring back the crystal radio concept, which is a radio that powered itself off the transmitter that it's listening to. And then to take that principle and convert it from electromagnetic reception with the long wire antenna.
I seem to recall making one of those things out of a Quaker oatmeal box or something back when I was a kid.
It used to be, when kids used to do productive things, everybody built a crystal radio, and you built your model trains and all that type of stuff. So what I did is I took that concept and then carried it over to the Tesla telluric transformer. So the next idea is to light a light bulb off your local AM radio station, which would prove Tesla right. And people did manage to light small light bulbs, and the range of reception is greatly improved in that mode, because the AM radio station not only has the tower, but it has to have a system of ground radials. So not only do you have the electromagnetic component, as Tesla shows in his diagrams off the tower, but you have a telluric component going through the ground radials. So the Crystal Radio Initiative was to build a receiving system that pulled this out of the ground, not only received enough power to operate the headphones or whatever that you're listening to, but to actually light a light bulb. And it was a very successful initiative. A lot of people, built interesting, devices that worked. And unfortunately, it's kind of all petered out. But I learned quite a bit about myself from it because I don't really have a laboratory or way to do that anymore. So by watching people build this stuff and helping them and answering their questions and reading their results is really quite fascinating. I think that's as close as we come so far to actually having completely tapped one of the aspects of Tesla's understanding and engineering.
Now here again, this is a question that's a little over my head, but maybe you'll understand it. Does the sky reflect Earth's mantle, or is there underground weather, and can it be predicted like on the local news? Could the Earth's mantle drive the Earth's weather?
Well, I don't know exactly what he's getting at, but I have seen mergings of underground and overground lightning storms into massive thunderheads. So there's a pair. There's a pair of these effects, but you're not going to have any wind inside the Earth. You're not going to have any rain. So what he means by weather is somewhat indeterminate.
All right. Now, at this time, remember a little while back, about a half an hour ago, I told you that if you were getting tired, you should put your hand up and say, hey, I'm getting bushed. Well, all right.
I'm fine. You getting tired?
You ran me into the ground. I'm putting my hand up saying, hey, I'm starting to get tired. It's to those in the audience, it's 11 o'clock p.m. here on the West Coast. It's time for me to be in my jammies, my nice warm bed, kissing my wife on the cheek. But, couple of things we've got to accomplish before I blow out of here. First of all, Mr. Dollard, as my guest, I would please invite you to take a deep breath, think about it for a moment, and provide us with your parting comments. Frankly, you are the featured presenter of the evening, and I should give you an opportunity, as our featured presenter, to provide the audience with a summation of the presentation we provided them with this evening. So please, at this point, sir, you have full screen. The floor is yours. Take it away.
Well, I don't know how we can sum something up where, you probably have 5,000 questions and we just scratched the surface. So I think rather than summing something up, we've opened a new possibility beyond summation.
Well,
and then,
with regard to that, let me interrupt you. Is there a possibility that we might be able to twist your arm and get you back on the Smart Scarecrow show maybe in, a month or 6, perhaps coinciding with the publication of your book, so we can do a firm offer on your book? Is that a possibility? Could we get you back in as a guest here again?
That would be very difficult because in a month I will probably be deep in the wilderness somewhere.
I understand. Did put the invitation on the table though, but please continue with your summation. I don't want to steal your time.
Well, like I say, we've only just kind of cracked the lid. Trying to sum it up, I did want to point out that this presentation's out. People getting the presentation, it'll help them understand some of these basics, and also it does me a little good too. I know I get some money to to pay for all this stuff. I've got to be driving around and and doing all this, so that's that would help out. That would kind of sum up what we were talking about the book and all that. Is I kind of need to get some kind of how would you say, support going or something. So the situation I'm jammed in now is because of the problem and we kind of talked about is going to just make my overhead skyrocket. I was promised that I was going to be provided with the lab and it was going to be covered, and I was going to be able to pursue what was necessary for the lab and the municipality and the organizations that are in the neighborhood, and now I'm told that that's not happening anymore, and I'm left holding the bag. So I'm very desperate to try to figure out how to pay for all this stuff because I live on a fixed Social Security income, and this day and age, that just covers the food, gas, and beer. There's nothing left over for anything else. So I suppose that could be a summation right there.
All righty. Mr. Eric Dollard, first of all, I would like to thank you on behalf of the audience for being very patient with us. I mean, you managed to, man, if this was, if we were doing shots, you drank me under the table, man.
Well, thank you, because I enjoy this kind of stuff. Unfortunately, it's kind of my bedtime, so I usually don't drink coffee this time of day. I'm usually just finishing dinner, and the sun goes down, I go down, so... But at any rate, I got relit for this, and I think I liked it. I think it was fun. So thank you.
Good. Well, I'm glad you had fun. I told you coming in here that I wasn't going to be throwing any softballs at you, but it was not my intent to be adversarial either. I'm sure you and I differ on many topics, but I'm a big enough man to agree to disagree, and I appreciate you stopping by and giving this much time to my audience. I'm sure they appreciate it.
Well, you're all welcome.
All righty, and on that note, Mr. Dollard, thank you very kindly, and I bid you good night.
Good night.
All right, to the audience. That was our presentation for the evening with Mr. Eric Dollard. I hope you enjoyed it, and yes, there is much material in what he presents that I'm certainly not in agreement with. But like everything else, it's really up to you. Make up your own damn mind. And if you should choose to offer Mr. Dollard some support, you can send him a check to Eric Dollard at General Delivery, Long Pine, California, 93545, and I'm sure whatever small amount you might be prepared to contribute to his ongoing expenses will be appreciated. He does indeed have materials available for sale at ericpdollard.com. If you might prefer to support him in that way, please avail yourself of the items that he has for sale at that site. And that's it for tonight's Smart Scarecrow Show. It's been a pretty long one. It is indeed a bit past my bedtime. But before I shut her down for the evening, I will do my very best to address any last-minute issues that this audience might wish to direct at me. So if you've been holding back and you want to throw some rotten vegetables my way, now's your chance. I'm checking the chat room now. We've still got some 63 people. No, man, I'll tell you, those greedy SOBs in the black Suburban ate every donut with pink sprinkles I had. They're all gone. I may still have a honey bun I can have just before I go to bed. Let's see here. I did see an interesting comment come through related to Marco Rodin, and he's apparently acquired a school. To be honest with you, I saw a lot of really good questions go through the chat room, and to all those of you who asked questions that just flat got past me, my apologies. I did the best I could, but you got to remember, I'm an old geezer, and some of Eric's explanations were kind of long. They took some time to develop. I do apologize for any really, really, really good questions that I just was not able to get through. But I think in the long run, we handled a good chunk of the interesting questions that folks had. So I hope that gave you what you were looking for. Let's see. Was it good for me? I'm not sure what you mean by that. I'm not sure I'm going to touch that with your poll. Let's see. Will I make this available as a recording? All of my broadcasts are recorded. They're published. As a matter of fact, when I roll the credits, you'll see the licensing agreement on my material. My material is all published Creative Commons. You can download it from YouTube. Do with it as you please. Let's see here. I'm looking. think Tech Z treated him bad, or to be honest with you, there was enough mudslinging going on from all corners that there are no good guys or bad guys when that kind of stuff goes on. I mean, I'm not even going to get involved in that argument. Let's see here. Lindemann is totally incompetent in electronics. Well, I'm sure he'll be pleased to hear that discussion. His book on cold electricity is pure BS. Well, let's put it this way. It went right over my head. There may be an argument or two in there that makes sense, but not to me. I think Eric did just fine. I think he carried himself very well. I think he did his best to address the questions as best he could. So yeah, what can I say? Let's see. Lindemann's PhD is in life sciences. Well, my PhD is in theology. I mean, all right, let's see here. No sun in space. What's with that? Well, like I say, there's a lot of things he presents that, I disagree with. I mean, as far as what the sun looks like in space, I've seen photographs from spacecrafts, and I believe what I see. They can't all be airbrushed, but that's neither here nor there. On this meth thing, frankly, I always did figure that was kind of blown way out of proportion. I mean, all of us children of the 60s, and you got to remember, I am Dollard's contemporary. All of us children of the 60s experimented with, a wide variety of different mind-altering substances. And, chances are that, at some point in my life, I've done some stuff that Eric was, oh, you're kidding, you actually did some of that shit? I take that with a grain of salt. That's just, it's just more noise. It's just more noise. Termites control the methane levels in the world. Okay, maybe. Don't know. Okay. All right. I think I'm not sure that there's any more really relevant questions flying around out there. Going once, going twice. Yeah, I think you're right, Zero. It's about that time, man. We've gone for a solid 2 hours at this point, man. I'm running out of gas here. It's that time. Hey, thank you all for spending your Thursday evening watching the Smart Scarecrow Show. I hope you enjoyed it. I've still got some work to do. This video has to be transcoded into a suitable format to upload to YouTube, and then the upload has to take place. So I ain't done yet. So at this point, I will bid you a good night, and you betcha we'll see you again next week. Good night, all.